everyone, I'm Michaela Rogers. I'm an environmental scientist with the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. We are giving people just a couple minutes to tune in, so I'll just kind of tell you a little bit about myself first. I am originally from Louisville. I currently live in Lexington and I work here in Frankfort at the headquarters for the department. I have been here for, it'll be 2 years this summer in this position. I work on our Monarch conservation plan here, as well as some other at-risk species projects. And then I also did kind of a seasonal position a couple years back with the department, working on a whole variety of at-risk species projects. So we'll give people just another second. And then today we're going to be talking about the Monarch Butterfly, and we are also going to be talking a little bit about our Kentucky Wild program. I think we're good to go. All right, we're going to jump in here on today's presentation on Monarch Butterflies. So, the Monarch Butterfly. It is one of our most iconic pollinators. It is a butterfly that a lot of people recognize or have seen before, whether they have reared it in one of their classes or they have seen it in their backyard, maybe out on a hike somewhere. It is this bright orange butterfly. That coloration really catches your eye. But what I want to talk about for the first thing today is what makes this a butterfly. So we know that the Monarch Butterfly is an insect. And then within insects, we have an order called Lepidoptera, and that is the order that contains all of our butterflies and moths. So Lepidoptera very literally means scaly wing, and monarchs or butterflies and moths have scales that cover over their entire wings, little tiny scales that help give them their coloration. But within this order, how do we know whether it's a butterfly or if it's a moth? And one of the biggest differences you can look at is if you're looking at your insect, whether it's a butterfly or a moth, you can try to tell whether its wings are folded up when it's resting or whether they're just kind of laying flat. This monarch here is in a resting position, and so its wings are actually kind of folded up in that position. If it were a moth, it would more likely be the wings would more likely be laying flat. Not all butterflies and moths kind of stick to that wing position though. So another way that you can tell is if you have a butterfly, you're more likely going to be seeing it in the daytime. So butterflies are diurnal, whereas moths are nocturnal. So if you're seeing it at night, it's more likely a moth. If it's active during the day, it's probably going to be a butterfly. The third way that's kind of the best way to tell between a butterfly and a moth is a butterfly is going to have these very knob-like antennae, and so at the end of their antennae they're going to have those knobs, whereas a moth is either going to have antennae that go straight across, or they're going to kind of feather out or fan out. They're going to have kind of those bigger feathery antennae. So those are kind of the three differences between the two. We're really just going to focus in on our Monarch Butterfly today, but I thought it was important to kind of go over those differences to start with. So for the Monarch Butterfly, we're going to start right where the Monarch Butterfly starts, which is in the egg. And in our photo here, this adult monarch butterfly is laying eggs directly on the milkweed plant. And the milkweed plant is the only food source for her monarch caterpillars. So she knows when she's laying those eggs, she needs to lay them right on the plant that her caterpillars can hatch out and begin to eat. So to zoom in here on this egg, to give you a little bit of a closer picture of what this looks like, this is a monarch butterfly egg. The closest thing that I can compare to the color is it almost looks like a pearl. Like it's got a little bit of sheen to it. It's pale. It looks almost like it could be see-through, but it's not at this stage at least. And it has a bit of a point to it at the top. So if you're looking at insect eggs and you're trying to tell if you could be looking at a monarch egg, you're going to look for it to be slightly pointed at the top, and you're also going to be looking for these vertical grooves going throughout the egg. It might be kind of hard to see that on the screen, but if you have a little hand lens when you're out looking, that's going to be the best way to kind of get a handle on what those grooves look like. So your caterpillar is going to hatch out of this egg 3 to 5 days after the monarch butterfly has laid it. And it is going to hatch out as a really small first instar caterpillar. So this is that caterpillar right there. It is very small. I hope you guys can maybe see a little bit of an outline on the screen. The very first thing this first instar caterpillar is going to do is eat its own eggshell because it's a great source of protein for that caterpillar. Now, when I say first instar, what I mean is this is the first stage of the caterpillar. So they're going to go through 5 stages before they're ready to pupate into an adult. And so this is the very first stage, and as they eat and get bigger and molt, they're going to go through each instar stage. And eventually you're going to get a caterpillar that looks like this. It is a lot bigger than that one we were just looking at. So this is our 5th instar caterpillar, and this is going to be about ready to pupate. So when it's going to pupate, it's eaten a whole lot of milkweed leaves. Hopefully it's had plenty of food, it's had plenty of milkweed leaves. It is going to move on to usually another plant. It usually doesn't pupate right on the milkweed. I have seen it occasionally, but normally they're going to move on to something else, maybe a shrub or a grass, something like that, near the milkweed plant or a little ways away. And it is going to hang in this J formation, and it is going to slowly get into its chrysalis. So what's going to happen first is it's going to start to shed its skin when it's after that J stage, and it is going to form its chrysalis, which is actually right under the skin. At this stage where it's shedding its off, it's already got its pupa or its chrysalis ready to go. So the monarch is going to stay in that chrysalis for 10 to 14 days sometimes, depending on the weather. If it's cooler, it'll take a little bit longer. If it's warmer, it might be a little quicker. And eventually that chrysalis is going to turn clear. So you can see a little bit of the monarch's wing here in this chrysalis, and once it gets really close to hatch out, you're really going to be able to see some of that coloration in that clear chrysalis. So this is the monarch starting to come out of its chrysalis, and we call that eclosing. So the monarch is eclosing from its chrysalis. And this is when it's just barely hatched out. You might look at this and think that maybe it formed wrong, it didn't quite go through metamorphosis correctly, but really this is an important stage because the monarch is going to hang upside down on that chrysalis, and it is going to pump hemolymph, which is insect blood, into its wings. It'll be kind of pumping them back and forth, hanging upside down, letting gravity do some of the work there, so that it can properly form its wings and take on that adult butterfly shape that we expect monarchs to look like. And so to recap here, we have gone through a complete metamorphosis, which is what the monarch goes through. It's gone from egg to larva, pupa in the chrysalis stage, and then adult. So we've made it to our adult stage here. We have our adult butterfly. You might be wondering how you can tell whether this butterfly, the adult that you're looking at, is a male or a female. And your best bet for that is going to be looking at the wing veins. The female is up here, this is the male down here, and this is the female up top, and the female is actually going to have thicker veins up here than the male does. The male also has something that the female doesn't have, which are these 2 black dots. Hopefully you guys can see that a little bit. These 2 dots here are actually pheromone sacs that the male has and the female does not. So if you're looking for them, and sometimes the veins can look a little bit thicker on the male, so if you really want to be sure, check for these dots on the male butterfly. Another thing I wanted to talk about is a look-alike butterfly for the monarch. So you might initially look at these 2 butterflies and think, okay, well, we've got 2 adult monarch butterflies here. But actually one of these is our viceroy butterfly. And so we have the viceroy butterfly also lives in Kentucky. And this is the 2 different butterflies here on the screen. They are actually mimics of one another. And so they both have that bright orange coloration. And what that is showing is to predators is that both of these butterflies might not taste so good if they eat them. The monarch feeds on milkweed and the viceroy feeds on willow species, and both of those have some toxic properties in them to where if a predator eats either one of them, they may get sick, they may not feel good, and so they're going to remember when they see that orange coloration that they don't necessarily want to eat that butterfly again. The other day, Rachel was talking to you all about snakes, and she mentioned venomous snakes, the difference between venomous and poisonous a little bit. And so this is a good example of a poisonous organism. The monarch and the viceroy would not be venomous because they're not going to be biting you. They're only going to be impacting their predator if the predator eats them. So another interesting thing about the viceroy butterfly is it is our state insect for Kentucky. And that's really fascinating because the viceroy actually stays in Kentucky all year round. So it's going to be overwintering in Kentucky as a chrysalis. It's not going to be leaving the state really. There are, of course, viceroys in other states, but for the ones that we have here, they're going to be completing their life cycle here for the most part. The monarch does something completely different, and this is what a lot of people know this butterfly for. Oh, and before we move on to what the monarch does for migration, let's just talk about the difference between the two really quick. For the viceroy, you're going to be looking for this line going across its hind wings, and the monarch is not going to have anything like that semicircle line dividing those wings there. So you're looking, if you want to tell the difference between the two, if you're out looking at a butterfly, you're going to look for that line on the butterfly that kind of cuts across its hind wings there. Okay, now we're going to move on to what makes this monarch so special. So the monarch does a marathon migration every year, and this actually starts, people consider it to start in the fall. So the monarchs that you're seeing here, August, September, kind of in October as well, anything you're seeing in those fall months, they're usually going to be getting ready to head south for the winter. So our monarchs will be heading down to Mexico every fall. They will spend the winter there in these high elevation OML fir forests, and then they're going to head back north. And so right now we are in the stage where the monarchs will be heading back north. So here's kind of our little graphic of the monarch heading from its overwintering grounds in Mexico all the way up into some of our southeastern states. They're usually going to be coming up and laying eggs in one of our southern states. Sometimes they just get as far as Texas, then they reproduce, and the next generation will carry on the migration from there. We also have, there's that one going back down. We also have monarchs that will make it in a couple generations as far as Canada over the summer. So they're going to be breeding up there, and then they're going to fly back to Mexico in the fall. We kind of have monarchs all across the eastern United States that will be coming up north, and then they will be breeding through a couple of generations in the summer, but then that fourth generation, or sometimes fifth generation, is that really special migratory generation that's going to be making this journey to Mexico. And what is really fascinating about this journey, this is what that kind of looks like, monarchs covering the trees in Mexico, is that the monarchs that are heading there in the fall have never been to these fir forests before. So they are heading that way, they are navigating there, but they have never been there. Their great-great-grandparents came back up from the forest in Mexico, but they are looking for this overwintering location that they have never been to before. So there's the monarchs covering the trees there. This is a picture, it's a little bit faded, but all these little dots here are butterflies filling the sky. So these are monarchs starting to head north in the springtime to get to their summer breeding grounds and to kind of go back into their states for the summer. This is a little bit of a closer look of monarchs bunched up close together. A lot of people think about they're going down to Mexico, so they must be going because, you know, they're going to be really warm and stay toasty, kind of like if you were going to Florida for a vacation in the winter. But actually, these forests are high elevation, and so they stay pretty cool. I mean, they can get down to, I think the range is like 32 to 60 degrees. So there's a range in there, but they can stay pretty cool, especially during the winter months. But this is actually a good thing for the monarchs because if they are staying huddled together, cool, they're not moving around very much, and that means they're going to save a lot of their energy for that migration north in the spring. Now, do we have any questions we want to go over? Okay. There is one resource that I wanted to point out real quick while we're talking about the migration, and this is journeynorth.org. This is just a screen capture from one of the maps that they have on their website. And these are all of the locations where people have started to see monarchs already. This is up to date for spring, and this is the location where people have started to see their butterflies, monarch butterflies, coming up north, and this is the first time they've seen them for the year. So we can follow these maps up through, as you can see, there's maybe one monarch butterfly that's been seen on the border of Tennessee and Kentucky, but for the most part, they haven't gotten here yet. But this is a cool resource for you to get online at any time if you want to follow the monarch's migration. They do it in the spring, summer, and fall. They create different maps for each migration. And if you see a monarch out on a walk or in your backyard, you can record it at journeynorth.org/monarchs. You can write down where you saw it, what it was doing, that sort of thing. You can record it on their website, and that butterfly will become a dot on that map. So you're contributing to some of the science for monarchs and trying to help scientists figure out the timing of these different migrations, because it does change a little bit with the weather from year to year. So I'll just leave that up for a second while I get a drink. So a lot of people have heard that the monarch population maybe isn't doing so well, and that is true. It has been declining for about the past 20 years, and that's for a variety of factors, but one of the biggest ones is the lack of habitat, not only in their breeding grounds, but most importantly, habitat and food resources for the caterpillars and the adults on their journey down to Mexico and back up north in the spring. So as we said before, the most important kind of the limiting resource for monarchs is this milkweed plant. And these are two caterpillars that are eating on this milkweed plant. This is a common milkweed plant. And that's going to be kind of the biggest thing that is lacking in areas is the milkweed resource for those caterpillars to eat. Because remember, if they don't have that, they don't have what they need to grow and develop into an adult butterfly. So in Kentucky, we have quite a few species of milkweed. This is just a few of them right here. The main ones that you're going to see this is the swamp milkweed and the butterfly milkweed, that bright orange spray, and then the common milkweed is of course the most common. This purple milkweed is not going to be as common. The world milkweed you will find, it's just, they don't favor it as much because the leaves are a bit thinner, but all of these are resources that the monarch butterfly can lay eggs on, that caterpillars can eat and develop into adults. The second most important thing, or possibly just as equally important, is that the adults have a food source. So if you think about you're taking a trip all the way to Mexico and you're a little butterfly, you're probably going to need to stop for some food on the way. And so any field with flowers or just garden with flowers, any flowers where they can stop and these butterflies can get nectar, that's somewhere that they can eat and refuel and gain energy for their journey south or journey back north. So anywhere that has both flowers that the adults can drink nectar from, or milkweed, that the monarch caterpillars can eat, that is considered a monarch way station. And so monarch way stations are gardens where we have both the milkweed and the nectar resources. So both of the things that the monarchs need to fully complete their life cycle. And they're way stations because they're kind of little pit stops all along their way. So these kind of come together and make a little bit of a checkerboard pattern across the landscape where monarchs can stop and get these resources. I did want to mention a couple of Kentucky Wild projects that we have been able to put out to help the monarch butterfly. So Kentucky Wild is our member-based program for supporting our wildlife diversity species in the state. So our non-game species are part of our Kentucky Wild program, and the monarch is one of these that we've been able to do some projects for. We've been able to put out some kind of large-scale habitat projects, putting both our pollinator seed and our milkweed plants out. And I do want to point out, if you look at this bee here, it is feeding on common milkweed. So the milkweed is not just good for the monarch butterfly, it's also helpful for some of our other pollinators in the state. Bees are also very important for the pollination process, both for native plants and for our crops. And we've also been able to do an event where we go out and we tag butterflies that are heading south for their migration. It's kind of just a little sticker that goes on their wings to track them, or if they're refound, then they're tracked and we know where they were tagged and we can collect data on these butterflies. And then we also did kind of a way station planting where we had people come out and help us plant a garden. So, and we'll pull up the website in a second, but we also have our Butterflies of Kentucky coloring book. This is a new resource that we have on our website. It is this wonderful native butterfly coloring book that 2 of our Monarch stakeholders actually hand drew for us, Bonnie Nance and Glenda Burke. They're both master gardeners in Kentucky, and they hand illustrated native butterflies. They wrote some really interesting facts about butterflies. So this is a good resource if you're home, especially on some of our cold, rainy days we've had. You can color this book and learn about our native butterflies. And this is kind of where it's going to be on our website, or it's already up now. It's under, if you go to fw.ky.gov and then you go to the More tab here, and then under For Kids, that's where you're going to be able to find that coloring book. We're also, I think, going to post it in the comments for this live stream, so you should be able to find it in either of those places. Oh. And with that, I would like to say thank you all, and we can certainly answer some questions. That's our Kentucky Wild website up there as well. But yeah, are there any questions?
How can we help support Monarch Butterflies?
So one of the biggest ways, as I said, is to plant milkweed if you can. If you have any space outside, you can either get milkweed seeds or talk to people in maybe like a local garden club, or your extension office might be a good resource to talk to about like what plants you have in your area available. But planting that milkweed and planting flowers if you can is a great way to support the Monarch butterfly. If you don't have that yard space and you don't have anywhere you can plant those things, there are still ways you can help the Monarch butterfly. You can do the Journey North logging. There's a lot of citizen science you can do with Monarch butterflies to kind of help scientists gather this data. So there's the Journey North, and then there's also monarchwatch.org, and those are both areas with a lot of good resources for people to kind of help monitor these butterflies and their caterpillars during the migration and otherwise to help out. And then if you are able to, donate to Kentucky Wild is a great way to directly give us money to help these pollinators.